Hey, I'm lurppis. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Now, maybe I'll do a tier list one day for the best Gamer Subs flavours. I obviously did that review of a bunch of the flavours a while back, but there have been many since released, like White Grapefruit, Anime Girl Thigh, Arctic Cooler. These are some of the new flavours. But I'll tell you right now, if I was doing a quick top 5, my number 1 at the moment would be Cherry Limesicle. It's a really delicious flavour. That's quite a fruity component. The Guacamole Game of Fart 9000, can never go wrong with that one. Strawberry and lime, it's classic pairing. White Grapefruit, one of the new ones, actually has that taste of like sweetness, but then with like a little bit of a sourness to give it some body. Clyde's Black Cherry is one that's right up there for me. I just think it's a very nice one. It does exactly what it says on the tin, as we say in England. And then a classic one, Dragon Fruit Punch. Never really go wrong with that one. It's subtle, but it's got flavour. It's got a bunch of different things going on there. And by the way, if you're going to make an order, use my code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersubs.gg for 10% off your order. And don't forget, include some free samples in your shipping. Why not? Try a few that you've never had before. They just give you a randomized set, I think. Right. So obviously I just did my video ranking the different CSGO majors using one of those tier makers. And I realized this is actually a perfect chance to do a video I've wanted to do for years, which is all these nephews and plebs on Reddit and HLTV.org and Twitter and all that, all think they know everything about pros and who knows. This guy has no game knowledge. He doesn't know anything. Like he know what he's talking, all that garbage. But they don't seem to get that what made me such a unique individual, and to some degree Maui Snakes continuing this legacy, is that I was the biggest #1 primary analyst in CSGO for years and years. I did the most majors at that role. Yeah, I was never a pro for 1 second of my life. I've actually technically played a match at a CPL, but that is it. I was never in any context pro. I wasn't even semi-pro. I was never even attempting to live that lifestyle. I've just been an enthusiast to Counter-Strike my whole life as an adult since it came out when I was about 18 or something. So here's the thing though. Everyone else is. All the other big names mostly have been pros, either in CSGO itself or 1.6 or Source, or there's even the odd person from certain other games further afield. And I've always wanted to do this video where I explain to you how good some of these people actually are, and that they aren't all just bums or just nobodies, or I think you might have played a bit. Like, some of these people were like winning championships and medals at World Cyber Games and stuff. Some of these people are very legit individuals. So I also want to just show the nephews out there, like, you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to some of these guys. Like, some of the names that will be at the top of my tier list is going to shock you. You're going to be like, what? He was a good player. Yeah, exactly. Maybe learn. Shut the fuck up and learn. So we're going to go over to the old tier maker again. And what we've done here is I've actually had to make this myself, haven't I? Because obviously there wasn't this particular one, unsurprisingly, for broadcast talent in CSGO. And what I've done is I have picked out 12 different names, and I've put the photos in here so we can all recognize them. And what we're going off here is 2 factors. There's individual skill / ability, like how good a player were you? And then how good was your career? What was your career success? And we're not only going to rank one, we're going to sort of blend the two. But I am always going to give individual ability priority over the career success. But career success will to some degree limit how good you are overall. So what I will say is, one last detail to mention is, when it comes to the CSGO people and the 1.6 people, I stand by everything I say. I watch their whole careers. I know all about them. A bunch of them have been friends of mine for many, many years. I know all the backstories. When it comes to the Source people, I have very rarely ever watched these people play. And so one of them, I'm actually just guessing at, it's just based on what I've heard about his career or where he was at in his career. So mainly it's going to be CSGO 1.6, and there's going to be a little surprise in there. So first of all, let's just introduce everyone, shall we? So on the very left here, we've got DDK. You might already be thinking, what was he a pro in? Well, he wasn't actually a pro in Counter-Strike. He was a pro in Quake 4. He was a Quake dueler. He played for people like Dignitas. He also was actually at tier 1, very good in Quake World, an incredibly hard game that he got into when it had been out like 10 years, being played every day by crazy Nordic people on 4 ping with amazing routing, etc. This guy grinded after his Quake duel career and put on the hours to become good at this game. You can go check out his YouTube channel. He's got a whole bunch of videos he's breaking down and concepts of TDM map control. That's why one of the things I have mad respect for DDK's game in general. He used to be a fan of Brood War. He studied Counter-Strike. Like, he became an expert in Counter-Strike. That wasn't even his game. That wasn't even his style of FPS before he was. So people might not know this guy once upon a time was a Quake 4 duel player. Then we have Fiffy. We have good old Fifth Line, Mr. 944 in the final of a major. But he also did win a major in his career. He obviously was in the greatest team of all time at one point in time, the NIP of 87-0. So obviously did loads of events. If modern people are like, is he a talent? He did loads of events for me back in 2015, 2016. Then you have Henry G. Henry G was obviously a Source player and was a professional in Source. We'll get into it, but I've heard he was pretty good. And then obviously in CSGO, initially he was actually working with some sort of company like setting up PCs or something. Then he came into commentary and became maybe the best play-by-play colour commentator ever. You've got to put him in that category, right? He's phenomenal. We've got Lurppis, a.k.a. Tommy here. That's this one here. He was a CS 1.6 pro with the best Finnish teams. We've got Maniac, who was a CSGO pro. He also technically played 1.6 and was at some SWCs. Just he was in irrelevant teams, so I never knew about him back then. In CSGO, obviously he played in teams like LDLC, Titan, and quite frankly, had quite a good career all in all. Obviously now arguably the best analyst in the game. We have little Moses there, was a 1.6 pro, famously playing in a team where his brother was the in-game leader. This is way back in the day, early 2000s. Another early 2000s, which is we're talking about Natu here, obviously owner of Ents now, but did a whole bunch of broadcast talent work with me, was once a top player in 1.6. We have Pimp. This is one of the ones you're all going to laugh at. Pimp, like he knows everything. You've seen him on stream getting killed all the time. Pimp was one of the best CSGO players at the beginning of the game. Played with a little guy you might know called Glaive of Western Wolves. There's Sean Gares here. Obviously didn't do that much talent work, but he came in and out depending on where he was at with his teams. Was a fantastic analyst, could have been the best in the world. We had a pretty good CSGO career all in all, went deep in majors and was obviously one of the best NA in game leaders. Then and was technically a 1.6 pro, but like at a low level. Then you have Chad, aka SPUNJ, aka SPUNJ, aka ESL Shield, ESL whatever, fucking rent boy at this point in time, who the fuck knows. This guy was a captain of Renegades, obviously the CSGO team. Not too much success beyond that. Vendetta is one of the ones I admit I'm just going blind off on this. I know he was a pro player, like a semi-pro player. I mean, the scene was small in Source, coming from Norway, but he was playing at some of the lands, so I'm going to give him credit as like a pro on the low level. And then we have YNK, Yanko. You might not know this, but he was a CSGO pro. He even played at one point in time with people like Kassad, Emmy, if you know that guy, obviously Nico. Played with some of these guys back in the iNation days. So there we go. There's our 12 names. And just like any tier list, I'm going to do it quickly. And then I'm going to try and go more carefully between the tiers and pick them out. So remember, I am massively emphasizing individual ability / skill. So we'll just put people in tiers initially. So DDK was in a skillful game. He wasn't anywhere near the top. He was just at the dual level. And he wasn't the best. He didn't have an enormously good career. So I'm going to say for him, just because it's Quake, I'm going to give him B tier. Because Quake is a good, incredibly hard game to be good at and requires a lot of it's like chess mixed with like fencing. It's a really difficult game. That and StarCraft are two of the hardest games ever in esports. It's much harder than Counter-Strike, in my opinion. It's the team component of Counter-Strike that makes it brilliant. So he immediately goes to B tier. For Fifth Lauren, look, he obviously had a fabulous career in terms of championships, wins. He won a major. He was in 3 major finals. He won his 3rd. The problem is, individually, I don't think he was a very good player, even though he was still a pro and could still play at a tier 1 level and win championships. So I feel like I have to put him B at the moment here. But I'll think about that one because the career might boost him to A. Then we got Henry G. Not only was a fabulous commentator, as far as I know, didn't know that much about Source, was actually one of the best UK players, was in some good teams, was even in some international teams. So I already feel like he's going into A because I don't feel like he was like some god at Source based on what I've heard, but he seemed like he was a very good player and had a good pro career. Then we got Lurppis. This is one that's going to shock you already. He was the leader at one point in time of the #1 team in the world, Rockat/69N 2018. He was someone who's been in like semis of World Cyber Games and IEMs, so majors basically. He's won championships over people like Forrest and Khan on LAN and beaten them. Towards the end of his career, MSI beat it earlier on in his career when it was at stuff like the NGL1 finals. He's won VSG events. This guy's had a lot more success than people probably realise. One of the leaders of one of the best teams. He instantly S-tier, by the way, because not only his role, an in-game leader, was he very good, one of the best in the world, like top 5 and more at times, but actually as a player, he could frag a bit as an IGL as well. And he was coming from a smaller region in Finland, but was still getting this success and was easily the captain of the best Finnish teams. So he immediately goes to status 1. Then we got Maniac. Now, this is what's tricky. Because Maniac has always been a supportive element / an entry. So people are going to think of the Titan days when Kenny S was hard carrying, they lost Cayley, and Maniac sometimes was a liability. But first of all, he had a little run around like the spring to summer where he got pretty good, actually. And then secondly, he was never meant to be a star player. But he's been in teams like, for example, you might not know this, but without Kenny S, without Shocks, without any of these Ziwu, any of these legendary French players, did you know Maniac has been in the semi-final of a major? It was actually the major won by Fifth Lawrence Nip, ESL1 Clone 2014. He was playing great CS. Happy was the best player on his team in Cayley. And Apex. Oh, sorry, Apex was actually the main star, but that says it all. Apex is your main carry, who was a very good player back then. And quite frankly, I think should have been in the final, would have won this event. Same with Cloud9, Sean Gers will get to it. So actually underrated career, but yes, individually was never a monster player for me. So already I'm feeling like he's probably going to go like Fifth Lauren. He's going to go into beta. I think probably underrated his career. In fact, I probably overrated Dan's career, but we'll get to that later. Then we got Moses. This is another one's definitely going to shock you because he's so amiable and he doesn't seem like a guy with a big ego. You're going to think, yeah, well, if he's a 1.6 pro and he's on his brother's team, well, he's like the little brother that just let play. Probably not that good. He was the star player of the team. It was him and Frod were the best players. Frod was the dominant AWPer. He was the amazing rifler. And later on, he had plenty of offers to be in other teams and was briefly in teams like United 5. It's just he had like a girlfriend. He wanted to focus on school. He was always a very diligent guy. Like Moses actually is a natural talent at Counter-Strike. He's a very skilled player. It doesn't surprise me. He's taken so easily to every task he's done. He was an analyst. Then he was one of the best commentators. I even thought he did a decent enough job with Liquid. Look how they bloody were when he left and look how they were before. I thought he did a great job all in all. Just he had to work with some nightmare egos that he sadly, because of his personality, he'll never properly reveal. So actually, Moses, pretty good player. Not like a monster career, because it was only like a year and a half or 2 years. And it was mainly playing like in NA, even though you had the one CPL where they made the run to whatever it was, 7th or something like that. So I'm going to say for him, probably because he was a good player, probably put him in A at the moment. This is going to get interesting, because obviously the career part might change this. Natu is another one that's going to shock you. Natu, in theory, of every name on this list, it's between him and Pimp, but I would probably give Natu the edge. Natu is probably the best player of any of the pros, just player, on anyone on this list, including Sean Gers, Fifth Lauren, Maniac, Morse. It doesn't matter. Natu is probably number one. I mean, lurppis was an IGL, and he was very good at that, and his team was number one. Natu, at one point in time, he's probably a top 20 player in the world in CS 1.6. He had years where he's a very good player. He wasn't like Forrest. He wasn't like some super hard carry. He would often be more of a fill. But to me, he was more like in the middle of the pack. Like if people know players like Tentpole, maybe Magisk, who else are we going to go with? Classic ones. He was in that sort of team. He wouldn't be like your main star. He'd probably more likely be best as your third best player. Later on in his career with lurppis, he had success as sort of a supportive element. He had at one point in time been one of the main stars earlier on. But I think his best teams and his best years, D-Sky, etc., was when he was like the second or third best player in the team. So I think those two are instantly in S tier. Pimp is going to shock people too. Pimp, back in the days when Nip were ruling the roost, after they'd won the 87-0. Actually, it was slightly even before that, I think. This guy was one of the better players in the world. He was one of the best Danish players. There's a reason later on, by the way, he got to join the team that had like the likes of Dupree, etc. in them. The Copenhagen Wolves lineup when Device was out. I think it was when Device was out. And so, yeah, this guy's a fabulously talented player back in the day. Then later, he was even very good the next year in 2014, going into 2015 when he was with... particularly 2015 in Dignitas before he started AWPing. He was actually having some great success at one point in time. And then later, yes, in Liquid, he just took all the bitch roles and was willing to do that because he's a team player. And then because of all the streaming and the fact that everyone memes on him, he's an easy target. People act now like he never did anything in CSGO. Meanwhile, they're letting people talk shit on him, they were never at the level in the world he was at CSGO. So Pimp, quite frankly, immediately feels like an S-tier player, even though the career wasn't that fabulous. Well, I'll tell you what, not only was his team coming second place to NIP at those early lands in 2013, they later on in the year, on NIP's best map statistically, Nuke, crushed them 16-2 in a game at DreamHack Summer 2014, if no one remembers that particular epic game. So, yeah, that's a big-time result. Also working with Glaive, MSL was the support on that team. Nico with the C was the AWPer. Then we have Sean Gers. Look, as an IGL, he was good. At times, very good. Keyword at times. I thought he made poor choices with some of the teammates he had. And unfortunately, because they never won that major that Nip bullshitted them on Cobblestone, ESL1 Clone. They possibly could have won that major. It's not implausible. They could have been in the semis. Certainly, finals would have been on the cards. I don't know who would have won out of LDLC in them. there's a world where they win that major or come second or come top 4, but instead they just came top 8. They came top 4 at the first major when they were able to beat Astarter Dragons, no small feat. They were a super team of CIS talents. And then they lost to Fnatic, got crushed in the semis. Fnatic won that major. So I actually think in terms of career, probably underrated. Had that summer run in 2015 in the 3 finals, ESL Pro League. I think it was Face It Stage 2, and then, maybe the other way around, in ESWC, then Face It Stage 2. So in Valencia. Later on, when Misfits had the odd run at a major just to get into them, that is. But yeah, all in all, I would never say he was that good a player, though. I also think he was quite weak in terms of fragging. So I'm actually already for him thinking more like B tier for him. Then we have SPUNJ. Now, SPUNJ, his teams were almost irrelevant in CSGO. Like, Australian teams get invites or get to go, or if they go in a qualifier, can go. But they were never doing deep runs, largely. Like, even that major when he beat Titan, like, what happened after that? Exactly, irrelevant. What about that time when they upset a bunch of teams at, like, Gfinity, Spring Masters 1 or 2? The one where they were, like, getting a map off Nape and off Fnatic, and they were beating, like, top teams. Yeah, but the thing is, they didn't do more than that. Like, they never actually got past that. And that was JKS going absolutely ham. So I actually thought Chad was an all right IGL. I thought his mind is much better suited for the desk and for being an analyst. I actually still think he's a better analyst than he's a caster. But as an actual player, he was pretty bad individually. And then his teams were also pretty irrelevant. So I've got to say, he immediately goes to C tier. He goes down here. Then we've got Vendetta. Now, Vendetta's a Source player, and he wasn't even that super famous. So I'm going to say, look, apologies if it turns out individually he was good, but I'm going to have to put him like C or D. In fact, probably D, because he has the least experience of that top pro level of anyone here in terms of going to the lands, as far as I can tell. Yanko, brilliant analyst, really good personality on the desk. Also easily going to be D or C for this one. I'm going to have to say D, because I have to give respect to Chad. He was at majors, mate. He was actually like in big tournaments. He was at least sometimes taking him up off top teams. Yanko never did fuck all in CSGO professionally. He was just on like a smaller team way before that region got important. Yeah, he played with people like Nico. Okay, there's a reason Nico doesn't play in a team in that region anymore. But I will say, if you've actually played CS with Yanko, his skills are probably better than you expect. Like, actually, in terms of raw skill level, he is better than probably people like Chad, Sean Gares, Fiflaren, maybe. It's hard to disrespect people like Fiflaren because they were also competing as the absolute best players. Now let's actually change around this a little bit and let's see what we're doing here. Because I actually think, in terms of the order, I'm still liking this order because, as I say, lurppis could frag as well as an IGL, and he was the IGL, the #1 team of the world at one point in time in early 2017, and a top 4 or 5 team many years in a row, and was mixing it up and was in finals and was playing all the legendary teams. Then you have Natu, like I say, was probably a top 20 player, and 1.6 was a very competitive game, and he was even playing in international teams like 4 Kings and getting them to good placings. So he feels like he should be #1. S tier is pretty solid for me. Pimp was a really good player. His career wasn't that mega. Like, his career arguably more like an A tier or B tier. But in terms of individual play, like I told you, he actually might be. Him and Natu were the best 2 individual players on this list, then probably Moses, then maybe lurppis. Although on that one, it's harder again because lurppis was playing IGL. So I think these 3 are good for my S tier. For my A tier, this also feels right. I don't think Moses should be better than that because his career was too short. He was a good player, though. For the B tier, the question is DDK, because he was playing Quake, which I think is a more skilled game. But his career wasn't really that mega, though, and I am putting him next to people who are in, like, semis of majors. So I feel like even my bias that it's Quake means he probably should go down to C, even though his ability level is probably higher than all but 2 or 3 people on this list. He was a skilled player at a bunch of games. In the B tier, I think Fiflaren should be there. Look, his career was better than a bunch of other people. So, but I don't want it to just be career. I also want it to be how good you were as a player, because that's the part people are missing. Anyone could look up the Wikipedia and see what you accomplished. I feel like just because I don't think Fiflaren was that good an individual player, I'm going to have to put him B. I also have the controversial take. They might have won more championships if they'd maybe cut him earlier. Maniac, I think it's a bit underrated, but his career wasn't like God tier or anything, but pretty good. The problem is, if Pimp's all the way up there, can Maniac really be in B? And then the only problem here is if I'll put Maniac into B, it's going to seem so disrespectful to Fiflaren for what Fiflaren's career was and how many championships he's won. But I don't think just championships alone can get you into the top tiers. And Maniac was a supportive element. Okay, that's the reason why. Even though I do think at times he was good and I think his career is actually underrated, I do think that being a supportive element means I can't put Maniac higher. Sean Gares, it's mainly because of what a good leader he was. Individually, he wasn't that good. His career was actually pretty good. His career could easily be in the A tier, but I just think individually as a player, like at his role, he was very good. In terms of things like fragging and playing the game, not so good. Then was Sponge and DDK. DDK is easy because I would have had him as B. Sponge, I also feel like it's fair to put them. They should be separated from Vendetta and from Y&K. I think it's actually a pretty good list all in all. Like, spoiler, every person on this list is way better than me at video games. Playing them, of course. Way better than anyone who's a fucking commentator, interviewer, host. Just way better than all of them. So I think this is a pretty good list. I think you're probably going to be shocked though, aren't you? Because some of the names at the top, you probably memed on these people, especially Pimp, especially Lurppis. You don't know Lurppis has forgotten more than you'll ever know about Counter-Strike. So when some little bum now, just some entry fragger, like, oh, look at my highlights, thinks they can try. What do you know about the game? What do you know, mate? All we know that you know how to do is line a cross up and press left mouse button. These guys could do that and more. By the way, put some respect on Pimp's name and on fucking Moses and Henry G. Forget about disrespect. If you're going to say Fiflan's a legend because of all the things he did in his career, then say Maniac's a legend by that logic. Not on the same level, but of the French scene, one of the supportive elements. I told you he was in the semis of a major. He was like 2 rounds from being in the final of a major. This guy's no joke. You like Sean Gares, don't you? You're going to disrespect Maniac? Nah. And then for people like Sponge, you're just overrating them, mate. You just think they were better than they were because you just love them as a personality. I love them too. But as a player, it means the reason why I made him cry. It's whatever. It's whatever, innit? Yanko is my boy. Love him, don't I? But I have to put him bottom. He knows he wasn't some top player. He knows he didn't have a fabulous career. He got to have an awesome career as broadcast talent. So yeah, there we go. There's my tier list. Don't like it? Have a cry about it and shed your own tear. As Mary J. Blige said in her track, All I Need, you're all I need to get by, which is the case for me and my Patreon community who support this channel and these videos. Some of them include Theogony, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Tosh, Bot Pounder 420, Torin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Yurka, and a special thanks always to the main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content, or you want to take part in one of those longer esports discussions with me where we go all over the place. Well, if any of those grab your fancy, put your money where your mouth is, join the Risk Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.